Welcome everyone, glad to have you with us. My name is Henrik and this is Red Ice Radio, the program where we cover a lot of different topics and subjects. I hope you take the opportunity to also tune into some of the other programs that we have available for you on the website redicecreations.com. Our archives go back to 2006. Clif, along with his associate George developed the Webbot, or the Webbot project in the late 1990s. This is an internet bot software program, or a web spider, that originally was designed to predict stock market trends. However, it was eventually developed into something different, and now it's claimed to be able to predict future events by tracking keywords on the web. In 2009, when Clif last was with us, we covered how the Webbot worked in great detail, how the technology works, a few small details about the algorithms, what sources they use, etc. A very interesting program, I think, and this is still in our archives if you want to go back and listen. Today, however, in the first hour, we are going to get Clif's take on something completely different. We are going to discuss the story of mass arrests. If you have been following this, you'll know that author and speaker David Wilcock have been talking with a whistleblower, an alleged insider by the name of Drake, about the US military and the top military brass in the Pentagon and their secret plans to arrest people in high places, corrupt politicians, bankers, etc. Basically, all those who have been subjecting people to financial tyranny. Connected to this story is also Benjamin Fulford, a former with Forbes magazine who have been reporting and writing from Japan about the Yakuza and the White Dragon Society and their supposed opposition to the Western royal families and the Illuminati. Tied into this is also material about the severity of Fukushima being downplayed, and we are going to get Clif's take on all of this and much more. Before we begin here, I just want to mention a few things so that you know what's going on here. The following story that we are going to begin talking about here today is something that I've been getting quite a bit of email about lately. People want to hear more about it. They are excited and curious, and they want us to cover it here on the website, and that is definitely understandable. There are some pretty big claims being tossed around here, if I can put it that way. And if true, these claims needs to be questioned. We need to raise some issues and some points around these claims in order to try to understand them better. I guess that's what I'm saying. But I want to be clear in the beginning that we have now tried several times to get David Wilcock back on the program to give us his take on things. We've tried at 4 different times with one of his contact people, or maybe just the one contact person. I'm uncertain about that, but sure, I mean, that's fine. He's busy, we're busy. It doesn't always work out to connect and get together and do a show about it. So although we want to, have him on here first to talk about it, it hasn't panned out this way. We've also tried to contact Benjamin Fulford many times now without any success so far, to also get his take on things, to give him an opportunity if he's interested in doing so, in sharing his story with our audience here. So we do want to cover it and we do want to talk about it. So today we are going to do that, but we are going to cover it from a different perspective, a different point of view, one that is more critical of the claims made both by Benjamin Fulford, David Wilcock, and Drake, the so-called whistleblower. I wish we could have done this chronologically, if you will, start from the beginning and up, but it didn't work out this way this time. So anyway, we have Clif with us on the line to talk about this and to give us his point of view on this very interesting and important and somewhat complicated story. So again, I just want to make it clear that this is not intended as an attack on any of these people personally. We've given them plenty of opportunities to come on the program if they were willing to do so, to discuss it, and in fact they're still invited if they want to come on to talk about it, if they so please. So it's an important story, and it's okay to look critically at it as well. This needs to be done. This is simply about questioning the material being presented and the ideas, or rather the approach, I guess, as well. We'll get into detail about this, but and I saw this, by the way, on Clif High's website as well, halfpasthuman.com, that he posted kind of a similar little disclaimer there, clarifying that this is not an ad hominem attack per se. This is about questioning the material that we have been presented with. So, with that, welcome back to Red Ice Radio. Clif, hi. It's good to talk to you again.
Thank you very much. Very good indeed, yes.
Thank you. There's been a lot of unfolding and a lot of buzz around this story, and we do want to get your take on it. And I guess in the beginning here, you could lay out as much groundwork as you feel is necessary to be able to explain it for some people. The story is long and it's drawn out. It's been unfolding over a couple of months now. There are some
much longer than that. It actually goes back several years now with Benjamin Fulford's, I would say, creeping development of the story, beginning with his initial attacks on the powers that be. If I can start right in here, what I'll do is I'll jump back then. And I first became aware of this because I'm a martial artist, and and as part of my work with Half Past Human, on a personal level, I have flags in my spiders that bring me new and interesting stories about martial arts, especially because I'm looking for particular developments in that realm. I had spiders specifically looking for new language combinations relative to the martial arts, and they brought me this interesting thing about this guy claiming that there were 10 million dojos around the planet with 100 million fierce martial artists ready to go on out and stomp the shit out of the powers that be. And I thought, okay, fine. I'm a martial artist. I've been in the martial artists from judo at age 11 all the way through various forms of karate, both Japanese and Korean, all the way up into Aikido, and I've been doing this pretty consistently. I'm 58 years old. You do the math, it's been a long time. No dojo I've ever been in would any of the people I have been involved with in that dojo stir themselves to attack anybody on the orders of any of the powers that be in Japan that Benjamin Fulford were claiming were on his side and were going to do this. It's a very complicated story, but you can look at it in two different levels. You can drill in on all the details which are spun out of the mind of Benjamin Fulford, amplified by the inaccurate conclusions and accepting mind, uncritical mind of David Wilcock, as well as the now pumped in information from, my opinion, powers that be via Drake, because they've discovered in their terminology that Fulford and Wilcock are useful idiots and are good mouthpieces for information that they want to have out there with a certain level of emotional histrionics involved. You have to understand that Benjamin Fulford has a couple of claims to fame, which he's used the claim to fame to attempt to claim expert status as a result of that fame. Now, I'm not a real fan of experts. I have no degrees myself, and I don't trust anybody who does because of a whole lot of reasons. We needn't go there. But Benjamin Fulford is saying that because he used to work for Forbes magazine, he is an economics expert. Right. I would tend to disagree. I've been in Forbes magazine. If you want to check, you can find my picture in one of their issues in the late 90s relative to my software called Vortex and a company, which was a precursor to Half Past Human that I was running. And they put me in Forbes magazine. As a result of being in Forbes magazine, I had to investigate it. Bear in mind, I'm not a financial or money aficionado. I came into all of this kind of stuff through the software and science world, and sort of stumbled into this component of reality. And so Forbes magazine calls me up and they say, hey, we want to put you in there. And I think, oh, Forbes, yeah, that's right. I've got this image in my mind of Forbes magazine equaling something like an American version of The Economist. Mm. And that could be no further from the truth. I mean, it is the opposite end of The Economist. It's the People version, People magazine version of the economics world. All they do is take your picture, pump you up, pimp you out, and slap you in there with a few hundred other whores for all of the other Wall Street guys to try and come and feast on you. And that's the whole point of Forbes magazine. All they do is collect information. They are not an intelligence outfit. They are an information collector for other people to come on in and eat up. Quite literally, they're part of the predatory capitalism thing. But so Ben Fulford, all he had to do was to be a personality spotter, not in any way an economics genius. So it's not surprising that the scheme or idea that he's presenting in my mind is grossly inaccurate in its view of reality. because he is not an economics genius, in my opinion, and the information he's presenting, that there's this whole new, I'm going to encapsulate it in a nutshell, and we go into the details.
Good to do that, I think.
Yeah, his idea is that there's the Yakuza, the Japanese crime syndicates that are honest criminals, honorable men who are criminals and don't make any bones about it, are going to get together all these 10 million dojos and force the powers that be to accede to being arrested in their tens of thousands, and their whole money scheme is going to be replaced by this giant gold-backed money scheme run by the Yakuza and parties that are unnamed but go by the name of the collective name of the Dragon family. And
is this the White Dragon Society, basically?
Correct, exactly. Many names in this thing. And again, I'm encapsulating and boiling it down to a thick syrupy mass, and we can get into the details later, because my point is the details are actually immaterial. They do not matter because the whole thing is fictional. But my point on this is that his idea is that one money scheme, the current global petrodollar, euro, transnational forex managed scheme, will be replaced by another one in which money will rain down upon the masses of the people, and the powers that be will disappear overnight. That kind of a deal. So it's in my mind, it is yet again another external savior myth. Which is what they always hook us humans with. Doesn't matter if it's religion, science, philosophy. If you look deep enough, you'll find someone in there promulgating the idea that something outside of us is going to save us. And if you look at Ben Fulford's language, which I do because I'm a linguist, you'll find that throughout his entire message for the last couple of years has been this idea of the external savior coming to save us, and he's sort of like the prophet of all of this. Now, what has occurred is a relatively common phenomenon, and that is that someone with an uncritical mind and also a certain amount of fame, and that's David Wilcock, has latched onto Ben's story. Now, we have to understand that David Wilcock is not ill-meaning. He's not mean-spirited.
Is it fair to call him uncritical, though? He's done some really good stuff.
No. It is quite fair to call him uncritical, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
In my opinion, it is fair to call David Wilcock uncritical because his approach seeks for success. He said he vetted Drake. Well, he sought to prove that Drake was who he claimed. Therefore, he stopped as soon as he found the first piece of evidence that validated something in David Wilcock's mind, that Drake was who he claimed. Now, if any person in our reality that is based on having to go on out, for instance, and sail around to the planet, or build a road, or craft a building, knows you don't stop at the first point that proves your theory. In fact, your whole point in vetting someone or vetting a process is to disprove them, and I'll explain why. If you set out with the idea that you wish to disprove them, then if you fail, you succeed, because they were legit. But if you succeed, because you've proven that they were a fraud, or that your theory was fake, or it was a invalid way to approach reality. Mm-hmm. This is, in my opinion, the approach of a rational being in our reality. You set out with the idea of saying, I can't trust this. Now, David Wilcock always sets out, in my opinion, with the idea of validating, finding the evidence to validate his opinion when he sets out. So he did not attempt to vet Drake, in my opinion, nor did he ever vet Fulford. All he did was find something that he could pin in his mind that said they were legitimate.
There was another person in there. I listened back once again today to the recording, the first one there he did with Drake, and he mentioned that there was another unnamed source, as far as I understand it, and that confirmed that Drake was the real thing, and that Drake kind of confirmed that he was the real thing. This is the difficulty, of course, when we have unnamed sources. We don't know who it is. We have no idea from our point of view, which must be understandable for David and everybody else who believes this as well, that I mean, we can't know what's true or not, and anyone can say that we have X amount of people out there that are verifying the story, but from our perspective, we only get what we hear, basically.
There you go. Now, let's stop with that perspective right there. As rational beings, just the two of us, how shall we proceed? Shall we assume they're correct and base our movements through reality on that assumption, or shall we assume the opposite? Because there's really very little operating room in between. We find it very difficult to go along with the idea of, well, I'll not make a decision. Not many people can hold their mind in a state of deliberate indecisiveness. So I find it is easier to say, well, if I can't prove it, like I say, my pappy was from Missouri, which is the show me state. And around here, it's like, well, you show me and I'll start to think about that maybe I might someday in the future grant that it's real. I mean, I'm a skeptic, I'll grant you that, but it makes going through life a lot easier because I'm rarely going to run up against that real huge wall of disappointment that you get into with these cults of personality, which is basically what's developing here at the moment. We've got Fulford claiming that the Yakuza and the 10 million strong dojos are going to force a particular kind of an outcome. That's absolutely bullshit and bogus to begin with. There's not such a thing as a coordinated global dojo society that in any way is central authority. So there you go. There's Fulford citing that one central authority, this Yakuza-controlled central authority, is going to take on another central authority to save us. He doesn't get into how the Yakuza are going to benefit. And in the end, you know what they're offering? This is the funny part of it. Fulford and Wilcock, and we'll leave Drake out of it, but Fulford and Wilcock are offering, saying that we're going to be saved by what? Yet another central authority imposing a money system on the rest of it.
Right. This is one of the issues. I try to wrap my head around the story, and in all honesty, I have a little bit of difficulty following it. I'm trying to get to the core, I guess, of what is being said to be able to make a decision about it. But from my perspective, it's been somewhat difficult to do that in this case, because I'm reaching somewhere out there to find the evidence for it. I mean, this program is all about listening to people, hearing about different perspectives, and there's many things we've talked about and will talk about in the future that is simply aspects that we cannot confirm. And we listen to it, we talk about it, we hear it out, and that's always been my approach to it, which I think is a great idea. We just toss it out there, lay it out on the table, and people can make up their own minds about it. But in this case also, I just, from my own perspective, I have had a very difficult in pinning down some kind of evidence for it. Sure, this might be more things that are upcoming, there might be more things added to the story, so I don't want to jump to, prematurely on it as well and just say this is bunk and bogus. But I guess I've been wondering a little bit if some, sorry to interrupt, but if some people then are going to be replaced at the top levels of the elite, who is doing this? Who are they going to be replaced by? Or maybe the positions shouldn't be there at all. Go ahead, Clif.
The even better question: who are they going to report to when they replace the ones there now?
Exactly. Yes. Okay,
so because nothing would have changed, see, meet the old boss, meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's just that situation all over again. And it's like, okay, Ben, that's fine. You've got this nice little storyline going. And I won't go into the idea that you can find discussed everywhere in psychology that the mind is so infinitely complex it can never be used as a device for examining self, because we can never find the end of its twisty little trails. And it's always complex enough. Ben is not a stupid individual. He is not mean-spirited, in my opinion. I don't know what his issues are or where he's going with this, or why he's being driven to pursue it. I think I kind of understand what happened to David Wilcock and how he got caught up in it. The Drake person is I think he's a tool in a lot of the different meanings of that. And he's welcome to call me up and dispute any of those if he wishes. And he's also welcome, if he wants to, come on in and be a mean bastard, and we can get physical about it if he thinks I'm insulting him. But I don't find his participation in this to be benign. I'm a linguist, and that's how I'm coming at it, is from the language that is expressed.
Right.
I could go through and detail all of this and explain it all out to you, but I'm just giving you an encapsulation on it so we can get a little further. The idea that they are expressing, though, at its core, repeatedly, no matter what evidence may be propped up or proffered in the future, remember, their idea is that one corrupt system will be replaced with another corrupt system. And bear in mind that the people that Fulford is holding up as his examples of the shining light of everything here are backed by the Yakuza and the White Dragon Society, both of whom are criminal organizations. Now, I grant you, personally, as a decrepit old bald bastard here in the Northwest, I've got no problem with the Yakuza. From my viewpoint, they're honorable individuals in this reality. Same thing with Tong members. They have they make no bones about their formula and basis for reality. They are not attempting to in any way trick you duplicitously the way the powers that be are, who are criminals as well. So I can see a certain level of logic in it, the anti-hero approach, right? Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, the whole point of it all is one corrupt system replacing another. So even if Ben Fulford is accurate 100%, and I'm absolutely inaccurate, I'm not going to buy into their system any more than I'm buying into the current one.
Well, exactly. That's, I guess, also my point of issue here is we're still not in a system then which is where we have freedom for all. I guess what I'm getting at is I'm not doubting that obviously the elite, the power in charge, have their own criminal ways and that they on their own level kind of don't deserve to be tossed out of the position that they're in, because it's a great disservice to all of us. But at the same time, if this is done by another similar force, what has really changed at that point? What
Correct. You'll find very few people that lived through the process who would say that Mao taking over from Chiang Kai-shek was a great thing.
Yeah, it's like arguing, well, it was bad enough under the Romanovs, and therefore it was better under Lenin and later Stalin, and there's some people who would actually argue that is the case as well.
Yeah. So there's my real bitch on all of this, the reason that I even spoke up, because I don't really care what kind of a story he's running. I'm not believing it. I'm not buying it. He's not getting any energy from me, so it's not a big deal. But then we ran into a couple of issues here. Enough people that seem to give a damn about what I say were also listening to him, that they asked me, well, what's your opinion? And I kept having to repeat it often enough that eventually I just wrote it up and put it on my site. And then there's the other issue is that Ben started straying over to an area that is much more pertinent. Now, bear in mind that Ben's savior myth, the external savior from the Yakuza and the White Dragon Tong, is someday in the future, okay? There's never a date given. It's just someday. All of it's very vague as to when it's going to occur. It's all happening now, but yet it's not actually materializing. And it's a big planet, so it'll take a long time for it to affect any of us. But at the same time, now he started to say things that like, oh, hey, the whole radiation thing from Fukushima is bogus, and that it's all because the people at TEPCO and the Japanese ministers and everybody are all in the pay of the cabal that we want to replace, that they're out there spewing their even the minuscule amount of information that they're actually putting out. Mm. Okay, and so now he's entering into an area in which he's impacting my reality, because I live here with my Geiger counter, my nuclear disintegration meter that reads gamma, beta, and alpha, and I take readings at least twice a day. And I know the reality of the 800 bar and the 600 bar millistream or millibar jet streams, and the flow from Japan over this way. And I know the reality of the radioactivity in the fish. I've got a lot of friends of mine all up and down the coast here, all the way up north into Alaska, all the way down south into California, all coastal guys. And we're seeing all kinds of strange things in the animals. The planet around us is changing. In that sense, I'm pretty much more of a tribal guy. I live out in the woods here, right? And so I'm very much attuned to my big veggies all around me. My giant 180-foot trees and I get along well, and things are not right on our planet. Mm-hmm. And Ben Fulford is saying just the opposite. In fact, if we believed what he was saying, he's saying I'm a liar. So I had to say to him, flat out, man to man, as honorable a being as I could be, expressing myself as factually and as honorably as I could, without saying any attribution to motive, I told him, I think you're lying. that I don't think you've ever had a Geiger counter in your hand because, and if you did, how do you know what the background radiation was before the episode? I can tell you now that I bought my first Geiger counter in the year 2003, and I was so fascinated with it that I just left it on for months and went through battery after battery after battery and kept a log of everything I heard. So I knew my background radiation running continuously through 2003, 2004, and 2005 when I got involved with other items. And I know now that we're at levels that are hundreds of times that daily. So I know what's going on, and Ben Fulford is going to get people killed with that attitude. So I don't care if he gets himself killed. If he wants to live in denial where he's at and what's going on with the radiation in Japan, that is his business. But he's also saying things about people that I am kin to through my dojo connections. Because bear in mind, lots of the dojos I've been involved with do have Japanese connections. And the center of many of the martial arts world was actually slightly to the southwest of the Fukushima prefecture. And so there's a lot of people there that are in a world of hurt that have no money to get out. And we're dealing with that at a dojo level, actually trying to raise money for people to relocate to us, what amounts to honorable relics and that kind of things,
right,
you know?
Right.
And so I'm living in that world, and it's not what Ben Fulford is saying about Japan. So he's giving a false impression or an ignorant one. And either way, he's got to be called on it.
Right. We're definitely going to talk more about Fukushima, your ideas about this and the severity of the situation, what really is happening and so forth. You have some interesting information about that. Before we leave the subject, though, there's some more things we want to discuss here, obviously. Now, I don't read or speak Japanese, and so I have no way of knowing if any of the information that Fulford is talking about is confirmed in any way from other sources in Japan, in Japanese. Have you come across any of such confirmation, correlating details, information, such?
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, he's a reasonably good Japanese linguist, and his grasp of the underlying Japanese as opposed to the various forms of kanji is in my mind, really good. He does have factual supporting evidence, as does Wilcock. They can point to things like, I think it's up to like 800 plus now insiders have resigned their positions and are taking retirement at the ripe old age of, 39, that kind of thing, right? All these suspicious retirements, sudden vacation of very plush positions and everything.
Yeah.
As though, now this is where we start getting into the details of their whole story, and this is where it starts getting really murky. And the issue is that they point to something and they say, aha, I see a stone in the road. I know that stone moved there of its own volition, and that it did so because it was afraid of what was going to occur over here on the side of the road. And, the mail cart's going to come and flick it out into the middle of the road. Okay, but basically they're saying the same thing about these 800 people. They're saying these 800 people all resigned because they're afraid of our ninja hordes and what's going down and the mass arrests coming. I would proffer that these 800 people are part of the elite. The elite are deliberately crashing the system, which we could go into the cycle of that. Every 20 years, you poor fellows in Europe should have wised up and seen our experience. 20 years after we let in the Federal Reserve, they crashed it and they raped the country. So it was a Bohica, bend over, here it comes again time for y'all. And so, if we let the central bankers get into the Middle East, 20 years from now, they'll rape the Middle East and own all of their land. And as soon as the central bankers get into China in a big way, 20 years later, there won't be a Chinese thing left there. It'll all be owned by somebody in Israel. So, it's just one of those situations. The economic structure that is being proffered to us, especially by on either side, by Ben or by the powers that be, are all basically unsustainable. Now, what I find interesting about the whole problem with Ben Fulford and the other part of that stew is the offers of money for everybody, free. He's actually used terms like, money would rain down on Europe.
Yes,
and it would solve the Greek problem. And what they fail to understand is the basic underlying principle that we all operate on. And by the way, they have factual information. There are trillions of dollars of bonds, U.S. Federal Reserve bonds, supposedly secured by gold that were indeed legitimate. This is the same scam that hit Germany in the 20s, though. Okay, when their central bank crashed them, there were all these bonds that were suddenly appearing that were people were trying to crash or cash. Basically, the scam is this. The Federal Reserve Bank goes over to China at the time of a war that they engineered going on, World War II, and they say to all these rich Chinese, you know, you're going to be overrun by the Japanese here. We know for a fact you're going to lose all your property, and you're going to lose everything you've got. But we will loan you all of this money based against these the gold, and we will secure your freedom in a Western area where you won't have to worry about being shot as a warlord or, you know, a local domineering bastard, and have all your goods taken away from you. And so they get all the gold from the locals. They take it back over to the Federal Reserve, just as Ben Fulford and David Wilcock are suggesting, and they give them these bonds to be redeemed at a later date when the whole world has settled down. And oh, by the way, when you give us your gold, we'll promise to give you back more gold because we're going to make a lot of money with this. And that itself is a scam. What everybody fails to recognize is, okay, let's stop and state that Ben Fulford at one point is actually saying that the Federal Reserve is an honorable institution, which is bullshit, because Ben Fulford and David Wilcock are saying that the Federal Reserve stashed this gold. What they don't understand is that there are people that do assays of the various minerals on the planet, and they can tell you down to basically the tonnage level as to what percentage of the crust is this mineral at this point on our planet's developmental history. Now, I maintain, as an aside here, that the expansion of the planet changes those ratios dramatically, and we're in one of those periods right now. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, the premise is that Ben Fulford and David Wilcock think that all the gold that the Federal Reserve stole from all the Asians in World War II, especially the gold stolen out of the Philippines, is stashed somewhere in big caves. And they're willing to listen to anybody that says that they've been in those big caves and they've seen these caves because they want to believe it. The real fact of the matter is the Federal Reserve had that gold. It did issue those bonds. And what it did was it sold that gold as soon as it got its greedy little hands on it. And then later on, it conned somebody else that it sold that gold to out of that gold and sold it all over again. And that's part of how it works. And that's the whole banking scam. And if you'll note, there's a specific level of tonnage of gold on the planet, and all it does is change hands. Now, they do have accuracy. Getting back to the original idea of or do they have evidence? Well, yeah, there is evidence. There are these bonds. But then, to a certain extent, they're saying, yeah, there's evidence that the feds are crooks, but we know they're honorable because they stashed that gold and it really exists somewhere. And that's where it all breaks down. Those bonds will never be honored, just the way they were never honored in the 1920s. And you can actually find a lot of economists that will argue that it was the phony bond surfacing that triggered the hyperinflation and the crash of that economy, just as we are having right now. Very curious.
I want to talk more about this, the idea that the system is being crashed intentionally. This is very interesting. There is a lot of talk about the Pentagon, personnel, I guess, then within the military and potentially within other places in other institutions in positions of power that in some level seem to organize according to the some of the argumentation points raised by the people we're talking about here, which also is very difficult to verify, of course. It's some.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Yeah. There is a component to this, all right? And I'll be a stand-up guy, and I'll reveal a lot of stuff about myself that I would really rather not. But to be fair, Fulford puts his face on YouTube, and I'm not willing to do that. So I'll put a bit of my history out there. Okay, Fulford and Wilcock are claiming that there's a lot of guys in the military that are going to run out and arrest banksters and politicians and throw them all into basically what amounts to some kind of a trial. And we'll have show trials just like we did with Stalin and this kind of thing. And it's going to all happen without a revolution. And it's going to all happen, and these individuals are going to tell Ben Fulford and David Wilcock specifically ahead of time so that they can inform the rest of us.
Warn and say, stay calm, it's all right, it's okay.
Exactly. Right. Okay, well, that's all bullshit too. My dad was a lifer in the military, okay? My dad was inducted into the U.S. military prior to the Korean War through the draft process as a result of being displaced from Missouri, where his father killed himself when my dad was age 6. My father blew his head off with a shotgun in front of the family because of what the banksters did to him. So there's a bit of personal history to tell you why I have this anger. Okay, now my dad, later on in life, was displaced yet again because of banksterism, and goes into the Korean War. Okay, from that point on, he's a lifer in the military because he's found his niche. He's a warrior. I'm a warrior. I mean, it's in our birth patterns. He chose one route. I chose another. I wouldn't go into the military because I realized what the racket is. But let me take up to sort of a modern day kind of a thing. My father was good at his job. He got to the point where he was taking over regiments. He was like a regimental commander, brigade commander. I mean, he was a lieutenant colonel. He got promoted, field promotion from enlisted in Korea, and then took over and saved all these people. They wrote him up, this kind of shit, right? So he gets promoted all through the ranks. We get as a result of this, I got my ass dragged all over the planet and saw weird shit as a kid, and I grew up as a military brat. And so, you kind of talk about disengaging yourself from the matrix around you. How can I say that, I've ever disengaged myself when my entire life, until I was about 16, I lived off of that, right? Through my dad's effort there. Nonetheless, so he gets up to the point where in 1968, he got a big promotion, 67 actually, and he was promoted to Lyndon Johnson's staff as a lieutenant colonel on his way to full bird and heading out to general, right? And they put him in charge of something, and we can go into it if you want. We need not bother. But he was the military liaison between the White House and the operation that we came to call the Chicago Democratic Convention. And all those riots and all of that business, right? Okay, within days of the completion of that and debriefing, he left, he quit. He volunteered to go back to Vietnam for the third time to get the hell away from there. And life was never the same for any of us in our family. And so so I know the military. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis in a bunker because of what my dad did and who he was. I'm the son of a lifer, a guy who chose that from the ranks, not one of the guys who came out of West Point, not any of that level of the officer corps, right? So I saw it from the rough side. And Ben Fulford's lying. Those guys in the military are in a bind. They may indeed want to do this. There may be individuals that would want to do this. But bear in mind, their minds are controlled to the level that you cannot understand unless you live in it. And so every action they would want to take, there's 20 or 30 reasons already prepared in their mind for them not to take it. And these people are schooled in hierarchy in the reptilian mind to the point where they live in it constantly.
Right. You're talking about the breaking down of an individual as they go into the military, and then the rebuilding up of them again according to the standards that is set according to military protocol, meaning that it's very difficult for military personnel to break outside of the perimeter set for them. Is that a good way of explaining it?
Correct. Yeah. Their minds are so heavily controlled that the parameters that exist within their minds bind them to a reality. They cannot see a reality beyond that. My father existed in a level because he was spanning two worlds, because he was promoted into high-level officer corps. He saw it, but he saw it from a guy who was so traumatized by what he went through as a kid and the depression and stuff that it made an imprint on him that he never saw everything the way that they really wanted him to. And so I got an impression and was told a lot of things and lived with a lot of things that other people, especially as kids, wouldn't have been privy to. And I know it even in the movie 7 Days in May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was based on real action. That was there was a time there in the early 60s when there was that potential that there was going to be that breakout in the military, and they weren't going to buy into the racket that was Vietnam. And a lot of military people died as a result of their thinking. They were the first victims of, or persecuted for thought crimes. And they made a movie basically warning everybody else about it.
Interesting. If I, for a moment, can go back to some of the points you raised earlier, you asked,
Sure.
you mentioned that Drake is a tool, but basically, and of who? Do you have any idea about this?
I don't want to speculate. You can say Montauk, you can say MK Ultra. They're just labels. It's like I go out with my night vision goggles and I see these things flying around. Some things I think are human-made, but who made them? Couldn't say. I can't see labels on those. I can't see any insignia, but I know they're there, and I know they're out there doing things. So Drake's language betrays the same level of control that you would see in a denser, grosser form in the people that speak for the political parties. He is speaking on an agenda, on talking points that have been delivered to him. I know this from the manner and the words chosen for his delivery of those talking points.
Can you give me an example of that?
I'd rather not at the moment. I may write it up, but I'd rather not because it might betray something I'd rather not.
Okay, let's follow.
If you wanted to go and listen to him, though, or read a transcript, that's even better. Read the transcript, and every time you feel an internal discontinuity, and as a native English speaker, I feel it. I don't know if you would. But anytime you feel an internal discontinuity in the way the language is being presented, then you know he's stepping outside of his real personality, and there's many of them within the first 10 minutes.
Well, I felt this throughout the whole thing in a way, because again, I just go back to that initial point. I mean, I've been doing this radio show for a while. I listened to quite a bit of information pertaining and surrounding these kinds of topics, and I just, again, had a very difficult time of actually pinning down what is being said here. I mean, can we get to the point kind of thing? And it could be me. I might be impatient. Maybe not be, 100% fair there or something. But that's just my initial feeling of what I got from it. That I tried to just wrap my head around it, I guess. But it was very elusive and difficult. But again, as I said before, I want to be fair about this, and there might be more stuff coming up about this, and I'm definitely willing to listen to it. My mind is opened, but not to the point that my brain falls out, that I've said before. So I'm critical about what I hear. I just don't adopt it into my belief system and immediately, run with it, if you know what I mean. So
Sure. And that actually, the skeptic, have you ever read, what's her name? Pamela Meyer's book on lie spotting?
No, I do not recognize that. No.
Oh, she's really good. If you ever get a chance to interview her too, she's tremendous. She gives you all kinds of clues to guard yourself against deception, and tells you why, and why reality is so filled with deception, and why it's such a bitch, and why we deceive ourselves constantly, and this sort of thing. So, having read her material a long time back, having been involved with people that were con artists and seen how it all works and this kind of thing, you get to the point where you realize certain personality types are easy marks. This is why they're identified as, useful idiots in the military or the intelligence realm, right? And so David Wilcock, he's been pegged. They can feed him virtually anything, and if they feed him quasi-supporting evidence, he'll come to the appropriate conclusion that he thinks he actually concluded. That's the beauty of it, see, is that they show you a structure, and they never call it a barn, and they show you the paint and the wood and all of this, and they want you to come to the conclusion that it's a barn, and they let you come to that conclusion, and that's exactly what has happened here. And so these people have made certain conclusions that they then have such an intense emotional conviction of that they can sell it. Whereas if they were operatives and were presented with this to go on out and sell it, now they couldn't make us happen. It couldn't happen. In fact, there's another diametrically opposed version of this that is collapsing right now, and that's this whole Thrive movement. Okay, because the whole Thrive movement is a propelled, say all the right things movement, in my opinion. Not I'm just saying this is my opinion from looking at the language. Okay. They're saying all the right words, and yet there's absolutely no emotional conviction in it at all, and it's crashing, and it's not taking any kind of weight because the people behind it they don't buy it. They don't believe it. They're not able to sell it. It's a collective work. It is not a point of individual passion. And you need that individual passion anymore to be able to sell things these days, because people don't buy the idea of collective works anymore because of the nature of the change of individuals ever since the internet came on, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Okay, let's follow along in your line of thinking and discuss two other points here then. What would be, one of them is, what would be the point of this? And this kind of dovetails with another question that I had that goes into how far up this goes in the ranks. I know we kind of touched upon that before, and you're somewhat reluctant, or it's difficult to say, but do you think that they, the elite or whoever is behind this, then whoever provided, let's say someone like Drake with this kind of level of information, or are they worried?
No, Drake is a guy who had worked for my dad. he would have been a guy that would have been working for my dad, no question. So somebody like my dad, a lieutenant colonel, maybe a full bird, told Drake what to say.
All right. Okay. It's on that level as far as we know, but that order could have been given from further up as well that we don't know.
Correct. And where the chain goes, that's why I don't answer why questions. I can't say what their agenda is. None of it makes sense, okay? Let me ask you this. Why are they pumping out hundreds and hundreds and trillions of pounds of aluminum in the air, in the chemtrails? There's many different explanations, but there's no real clear understanding of why. We know they're doing it. It's almost undeniable anymore by anyone other than the willfully blind. And it's actually gotten to the point now where our biosphere is dying. We have a local tree around here called the madrona that is dying as a result of aluminum poisoning en masse. The madrona trees are just croaking right and left. They're just not going to survive. It has nothing to do with the freezing of the past years, has nothing to do with the weather. They're aluminum sensitive and they're all dying. The whole species is disappearing. It won't be long before our species is gone. We're aluminum sensitive too. So why is it occurring? I don't answer why questions because of the speculation involved. And speculation, like we see with Wilcox and Fulford, leads us into areas that are not productive.
Of course, but it does imply something. It probably means something, but the fact is that we can sit here and speculate and say all day what that means, and even come up with scenarios that never was on the on the agenda to begin with. But
correct. And that's why I annoy the crap out of my wife and people like George Ure, is because I don't like to think that way. What I would rather think is, okay, I see them doing this. I see them polluting my environment with aluminum. How am I going to respond? Rather than waste my time figuring out what they're doing it for. I know there's also other things up there. Morgellons came down by way of the chemtrails. There's other issues going on involved, and it's highly complex. And I could, if I wanted, spend a lot of time thinking about it, but we don't have that time. We now have to start thinking in my opinion, in terms of how am I going to respond.
All right, more on that in a little bit. What I'm getting to here is that, or what I want to ask you again is, do you think that it means that whoever gives the order here are in some level afraid? I don't know if that's the correct word of grassroots movements, that they do want to try to destabilize this. I mean, inherently, I'm more suspicious, Cliff, and this is what I'm getting to, that we have a number of things unfolding throughout the last couple of years here. Occupy movement, WikiLeaks, Anonymous, that are like, whoa, wait a minute. These are big organizations in a way that are vastly changing the geopolitical landscape and people's minds out there. And so I take a step back and just look at this and say, wait a minute now, who's behind this? Why?
Okay,
right. Go ahead.
That's what I would say as well. Okay, the who's behind it and why. But actually, let's dispute first off. Let's not make I'm very self-critical. Okay, I can barely stand myself as a human, let alone anybody else. That's why I'm a hermit of the woods. And that's quite true. I'm extremely self-critical, and that's why I'm very annoyed when I run across people like Wilcox and Fulford, who are very talented and could be great beings in my opinion, but they're not self-critical, and so they don't analyze themselves and their own motivation and stuff. But that's another side. Okay. So the nature of what we're doing, though, is you're making certain statements that are not true. WikiLeaks hasn't changed the nature of our reality. Okay, it came off. It has a big splash. It was a nice show for a while. There's all kinds of drama involved. What's the net result? Ain't shit. We haven't heard anything that changed anything. None of it went to any level of fundamental change. It was all at the same kind of fake change that the minions and Obama and these kind of people keep pumping out.
And that's my point. That is my point.
Okay.
That it's a fake truth. It's a fake kind of revelation coming to us. But go ahead, Cliff.
Oh, okay. I was just going to confirm that, you know, and then when I go back and I finally say, okay, what's going on here? Because I expected more. Bear in mind, I had these guys pegged. I knew that we were going to enter into a huge period of release language, and I got all kinds of shit from the world for saying so months in advance. And that release language jumped me. It started 3 days earlier with the launch of that ICBM off the coast of California, and then we hit that 63-day period where WikiLeaks came out, and we had all the brouhaha. And I expected that it was real. And then I discovered, oh man, I'd been sold a bill of goods in a sense, because as a person, I read the data, saw the forecast, but I actually thought there was something underlying it as opposed to just the big propaganda brouhaha to keep us all distracted. Make sense? Okay, so I was my own victim. So I'm saying let's not be our own victim here. And so I'm agreeing with you. Both of these things, the Occupy movement and this kind of thing, Not the solution. They're distractions. WikiLeaks is a distraction. If WikiLeaks comes on out and tells me that they murdered Pope so-and-so and they did this for this reason, and that the space alien agenda has been involved in the Catholic Church since back when, and every single one of these military patches that we see in the NASA things that have green eyes go directly to the space aliens that are controlling the intelligence agencies out of the Navy's largest intelligence base, which is in Kansas. Then I would say, okay, WikiLeaks is starting to tell us something that is useful, that is meaningful. But all this drama about Hillary and the other elites and getting us focused back on the celebrities and stuff, fuck it. I don't care about them, you know? They can go rot in hell. Ratzinger I don't care about as a person. He's an evil bastard, and I have a personal history that goes back to the Catholic Church in Germany that we can go into some other time if you want. But as an individual, he's not worth killing. You know, he's as much a stooge as the guy who wants to be king of the planet. What's his name? Not Michael. David Rothschild.
Yeah.
These people have their strings pulled. They have. I used to when I was still working software in the 90s there, and I was all wrapped up in my projects and stuff. I got really irritated because it looked like the bastards in the political realm. This was when I didn't really grasp what was going on. Bear in mind, okay, I was still fascinated by my mind's ability to invent things and was just pursuing that. And so I kept stumbling across this stuff. And for a while, I was really pissed at George Bush and all these guys, right? And because they were taken and they were going to kill my people, my friends, the people I grew up with in the military, you know, my cousins. We lost more men in my family in Vietnam than, I mean, I'm one of the very few that are left. I'm a survivor in that sense, but I'm the remnant of the DNA line because so many of us got killed off. And so I have this personal thing about these individuals being thrown into harm's way when they are just brilliant, you know, creative people that can go on out and we could fix the damn planet if we weren't focused on killing somebody on the other part of it. And so I got really irritated at George Bush. But George Bush, I actually went to the trouble of investigating it. And this poor twisted being, you know, was shoved around and maligned and maimed by the satanic bastards that are his parents. And, you know, so we are a gigantic planet. We are a dysfunctional family. And we need to face this at a personal level. So my heroes now are like, my personal hero is like Michael Tessarian, because he's grasped at least the central core of this. Now, I can't let go, and I'm a failed individual in many levels, so I'll never be as good as he is. But he grasped the only thing you can really hold is your consciousness. The only thing you can do to save the planet is to mold your consciousness on a daily basis, continuously. David Icke grasps this as well. And there are a few others out there, you know. Then there's people like myself that are too into their warrior nature. We're just born that way. My cells just want to react, you know. So there's quite a few people I want to pound into a little bloody pulp. I can't help it, you know, and I feel bad for myself, and I apologize. It's not a good thing, you know. It's not a thing for an Aikidoist, but I've got to be honest. I've got to take the Bruce Lee route and say, you know, the hardest thing on the planet is to be fucking honest with yourself. The second hardest thing is to express yourself honestly. And so I've got to say I've got that in me. And so I you know, I live out in the woods, and I deal with that because I am not someone that you would put into a situation. And so, you know, I will do things. I will withdraw when I know that my contentiousness is not going to aid it. And thus, when I don't control them or involve myself with the Webbot forum or the Webbot radio guys. Those things sprung up on their own. They interviewed the Thrive people. They asked me to participate. I went so far as to provide a couple of questions, but I did not participate because I know that I would not have let it go, that I would have taken that Foster Grant fellow there, and I would have, or Foster fellow there, and I would have just gnawed on him and pulled on him and tugged on him, and it would have been contentious, and it would not have aided anyone, and I don't know that it would have even aided me in getting closer to the truth.
Yeah.
And it would have irritated everything, right? But there's, again, it's like the Wilcox and Fulford thing. There's a vagueness, there's a morass, a softness that you can't come to grips with, that you just keep disappearing into. It keeps retreating ahead of you when you get involved in all this Thrive crap. And so I know it's not, let's put quotes around it, real.
And what is evidence to some will not be that to others. We're all different. We have different of opinions. We're all, we have a different approach to life, a different philosophy. This is just the nature of how things are. I don't ever think we can sit down and like agree, yep, this is the way it is, or should be done, or should be handled. This is simply about,
scare me.
yeah, exactly. I know.
Because then I know we'd be absolute mind control Borg slaves under a central authority. What I really like is contention, aggravation, release language, all kinds of crap happening all the time everywhere, such that nobody really has a handle on it. So I know that the political parties, they're criminal gangs being run by a guy at the top that says you all do this, And the media, let's call them what they are. They're propaganda whores,
That's right.
And boy, they get rewarded really well. It's like, okay, Wolf, you and the guys over at Fox News and stuff, enjoy yourselves. I don't want to be dark and foreboding and stuff, but you're not real individuals, and you will discover this when you die. And it's just not a good thing. And there's, you have all of these, if you want to get really bizarre about it, you have all these religions out there and spirituality approaches that say, do this, do that, and do this and everything. What's their whole point? Well, they're all talking about this point of transition that we all call death. Well, why do you think the Catholic Church went to such a great trouble over centuries to destroy the indigenous populations? They didn't really care about the indigenous populations. They want them as slaves. They wanted to preserve them. But what they had to destroy was the knowledge and the processes that were involved in the shamanic traditions.
Yep.
And from my viewpoint, from a personal viewpoint, I'm like an internet shaman, okay? I've gone that route. I've gone the psychedelic route. I've gone the meditation route. I've seen that shit. And you can believe me or not, does not matter. I can say the words and just grin, and you can see my smiling face here as I say them to you, that, I've seen the other side. I've seen the bardo. From this perspective, I have seen the bardo. And you bastards are not going to like what you're going to find there when you suddenly look around and see that huge mass of karma you're dragging, And people have come back. I'll tell you, people have come back from the dead and talked to me in that position when they're in those 49 days of the bardo, and they've told me about it. And there's no words involved, and you can't get into it in a word way. But again, fear goes away if you're an honorable being here. So in many regards, the Yakuza that Ben Fulford holds up, those individuals that are murderers and killers and so forth that are working out their own twisted karma, they will have far less of time in the 49 days in the bardo than Wolf Blitzer and Hannity and George Bush and these other bastards. I feel for them.
It's an individual journey, a path that the self must walk and discover, and anything is possible in the beyond, I think, in that way. And I think what this will be or mean to different people will be different depending on how we've lived our lives and what we try to do and how we try to better ourselves or not, to go against the grain, as it were. But let me just go back a little bit more here. We're going over a little bit on the hour, and that's fine. We need to talk about some more things here before we finish up on the first segment here. But let's go back to the resignations thing. That people are laid off, people are fired and such. Murdoch's empire is partially taken down. Strauss-Kahn is hanged out to dry. Lehman Brothers goes down. Is this consolidation of power, do you think, that we're seeing in the world right now?
There's certain trends there that you're correct. There's a certain coagulation to a thick syrupy mass as you move into the Depression. That occurred in the 30s and occurred in 1890. It occurred in 1861. So yeah, that does happen. However, what we're also seeing here is the Fulford and Wilcock pointing to an aggregation and saying that all of this aggregation occurred for a single point of a view that they have. So, for instance, there were a lot of these resignations, the 800 and something, that occurred last year. Early last year, and some that occurred for personal reasons, some that occurred for reasons people being arrested. So a lot of them are not of a central motivation. However, there are enough central motivation, resignations, and other strange things going on with the elite, some of which have been tagged by Wilcock and Fulford for their evidence, that I grant you there's a wave of change going on out there that they have at least had the perception to see. Makes sense? They're attributing a certain level of action and motivation to it that I would not, but they're seeing it as I do.
Right. I think I understand what you're saying. Are we just being? There's this idea of I heard Wilcock mention that there is a lot of people out there just spreading fear, and I guess from his point of view, maybe he's trying to inject some level of positivity as well into all of this. I mean, are we just being pessimistic for not believing what we're being told here? What's your take on that?
I don't know. I don't live in that world. I live in a world with what we could say is righteous or real suffering, where beings die, where they get sick, where they spend 10 years dying. So I live in a world of suffering. So the idea that, the birds are going to sing and the sun's going to come out in perpetuity, the chemtrails are going to stop and free pie for everyone. No, I don't buy it. Anybody's telling me that has got something to sell. My dad had this saying once. Let me see if I can recall it. He said, life is shit. Anybody telling you different is trying to sell you something. And he's correct. Now, admittedly, that was after his third tour in Nam, and he'd seen some stuff he'd rather not. But he's quite correct at that. There is deserved suffering, right? I get a saw blade through my leg. I must suffer the consequence of that act. There is no instant cure for that. You've just got to go through it. So I don't live with that kind of mind, and I cannot reconcile myself to that view. And I actually won't have it, just as I won't have in my presence, I won't have the crap from the TV. It's bullshit. It's as much a lie as the Fulford shit. Why should I stand here and listen to that when I know it to be untrue?
People want to believe also very bad. We're now in bad need of something positive news right now. So I think that's also a tendency, maybe why people are. I'm not saying that everybody is jumping on this, or even if they are, that they're 100% wrong. That's not what this is about either. But there is a need for some positive news in all this, because it's quite depressing out there at the moment, right?
Oh, it's depressing as hell.
It's very interesting, listening to you about this, Cliff, getting a different take on this story. And as well, on top of it, as we know, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and that's all we're kind of talking about here. In a way, we were trying to understand what is being said, and how we can believe what is being said, and also why we shouldn't to some extent until more things become available.
Right, exactly. It goes back to that same issues that they used to have in the old Cold War crap. And do you remember Reagan saying the trust but verify?
Right. Yep.
Okay, well, there's a hidden side to that you never hear stated. If you can't verify, you can't trust.
That's right.
Okay, so I can't verify any of the stuff that Fulford is saying about, or Wilcock, or any of these people are saying about unnamed sources. So I can't trust any of them.
But we can believe.
Right, correct. Now, and also, let's. I don't really need to get into that level of it, but it's really true that we do need positive news, that we are in a huge level of very depressing facts coming to light simply because of the huge amount of the internet, and the fact that you have a disparate level of awakening people, a growing number of awakening people that will find different parts of the awakening process to be intriguing to them, so they'll root out different things that the rest of us haven't seen, and they'll bring it to our attention, and the whole thing seems just huge and giant and overwhelming. And it's all quite true. And it is huge and giant and overwhelming. And I have found very little positive coming out in the way of the individual facts, but I have discovered that to a certain extent you get to the stage where you realize that you're faced with your own duality. Again, we go back to like the Michael Tessarian, your own grasp of your own consciousness. This is the only thing you can control, is your attitude, your response. And even that, you have to acknowledge the biology controls you, the sun controls you, the moon controls you. All of these things exert influence on your consciousness. If you're not cognizant of that, you are not cognizant. So if you're making decisions on a particular day and you're not aware that there's a full moon that day, you are not an aware individual making aware, competent decisions. And so if you get to that point, then you realize, maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility that the universe is indeed unfolding as it should. And that my task is to reconcile myself to a level of acceptance as opposed to flogging it to death. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is a very, very, again, going back to the Bruce Lee thing, because here you come back to honesty at a level that is internal. And this, I would maintain that you could have an honest con man. You could have a guy who lies to the world every single syllable he says, but is inherently honest to himself because he doesn't lie to himself, and that would actually be an appropriate response to a planet filled with deception. That wouldn't be an enlightened individual, because the enlightened individual would not fear being honest in the face of all the deception. But we must come to a way of as you say, reconciling or discriminating to the oppressive mass that is coming out now and will continue to come out. Believe me, we have not even scratched the surface. I know stuff that makes me weep. I'm a 58-year-old guy, and I'm pretty tough, right? And I've been turned into an emotional basket case by the stuff that's coming out about what the Catholic, Anglican churches and their master, the crown, that is to say the queen and her husband, have done to the indigenous population just north of me here in British Columbia. And I won't go into the details there, but they closed down some orphanages up there. And the Catholic Church did everybody a huge favor before they closed down the orphanage. They had 20 feet of soil hauled in to cover up the entire grounds of the orphanage, 20 feet thicker.
Right.
They had layers of cement poured into the basements of those buildings. And they had real good reason to do that. This kind of stuff, this level of knowledge, cannot, in my opinion, you're not all that human if you're not affected by it. And I don't know that I want to know you if you're not affected by it. So we are in an oppressive state, but there is something we can take out of this. And that is that I have not willingly participated in any of this as an individual. I may have willingly, as an individual, participated in the structure that allows such things to exist and continue. But from the point of my discovery of that, I no longer participate. And so I can be honest, and I can have acceptance. I can acknowledge my depression. I can get a certain amount of resolve out of it. And I can seek for what happiness has allowed me in this universe. But I, as an individual, have never assumed, probably because of the tortured nature of my own childhood, that happiness was offered to everyone, or was that everybody deserved it. Or not deserved it, but that the planet was supposed to deliver it. Makes sense? There's a lot of people that are sold that. 1950s around here, in the 60s in the United States. I didn't live here in the United States then, so I wasn't influenced by the TV, but I saw that stuff later as reruns, and it's like, wait a second. They're telling you here that, this whole 1950s structured cube world is basically the same crap that's in the Catholic interpretation of the Bible. And by the way, if anybody really wants to hear what the Bible actually has to say, there's this marvelous guy out there, Mario Biglino, who was paid by the Vatican to translate the Bible from the actual source material. And he translated 23 books of it. And then one day he found out what they were doing with his translation and said, enough, he's not participating, and they canned him. But talk about a linguist. This guy is just beautiful to listen to, even if you don't understand a word of Italian, just the passion in his voice. But he's out on YouTube, and you get a real understanding of what's been going on, of what's happening here. And we need something. I grant you that. I'm not the person to ask for that, because my role on this planet is not that. I'm more on the dark side.
It's very difficult when we're being when we end up in these different isms that promise us a certain set of experiences as we come to this planet. I guess I could say that everybody deserves this or that. It's the same thing with socialism, that they offer you some kind of egalitarian paradise. It is not equal in that way, and there's nothing, as far as I know, that says that life is supposed to be just. It doesn't mean that humanity shouldn't strive for it and be fair and all that, but as we come here, there's no instruction about that, as far as I'm concerned anyway. But what about the argument then that thoughts, intention, and what we choose to focus on creates reality? If we only focus on negative aspects, this is what is going to manifest itself in our lives. We're going to end up in a downward spinning spiral because of it.
So on. Okay, well, that's true at a very facile surface level. Okay, that's true at the positive thinking produces positive results, law of attraction level. Okay, and I can argue on a energy level why that happens, what happens when the karmans get that intention going on out, and why that has an immediate and facile surface shallow result, and why it fades. And none of those are really pertinent because anybody who cares to try the experiment cannot keep it up. They can't have the law of attraction continue without resorting. Well, basically, you're talking about the same thing that the powers that be do, but they really know what's going on. You want to have that law of attraction stuff work. You want to have it continue and supplant have universe provide you with glory, riches, wealth, and everything you want. Then you've got to crawl into a dark hole in the middle of the night on a particular spot on the planet. With moss and darkness around you, a barely flickering candle, and you've got to take out a knife and you've got to cut an infant open and consume part of that being. And you've got to do it at a particular time under a particular ritual situation. And most of the people that do that, we call the elite. And they can work it because it's that level of magic. So intent... I could also argue that, okay, that's bullshit on one level because you can't tell me what your next thought is going to be. You can't tell me when you're going to have an aha moment. You're not going to be able to tell me when you're going to be able to have a burst of creativity. Therefore, you're not in control of your own thoughts. And it could be argued that you're merely a standing wave receiver with specific frequencies and tunings so that you will receive specific kinds of thoughts. And so I had the idea to form the series of software programs that led to the creation that George Ur called the Webbots. And you didn't because I'm tuned that way and you're not. You had the idea to be a really cool red ice guy because you got that tuning. And the guy 4 desks over from you who may have had close to it is working for you.
So we have that idea that the decision to move your arm comes from somewhere else. We actually don't have any free will. We're just based on the impulses. Go ahead.
It's much more complex than that. Much more complex than that. You have to understand that you don't control where your mind does not, at the level of consciousness, as far as your little c consciousness in your body is concerned, it doesn't control where the skin ends and the atoms of air begin. Okay, so you're not in control of your body. You have no absolute control over that. The most you can do is to these crude levels of control of feeding it or not feeding it, breathing or not breathing. And even then I can argue you can't not breathe. But you could not eat yourself to death, okay? So you'd have that level of control. But you couldn't say, when I get up from this chair, I'm going to take parts of the chair with me. But there is no distinguishable difference between the atoms of your butt and the atoms of your clothing and the atoms of your chair. And so if you really were in control of that, you'd constantly be having to filter out the stuff that would intrude on you. Now, as a shamanic energy being here, I know it's much more complex than that. And I know, for instance, that eczema is a condition of disturbance within the energy body that can be corrected, but arthritis is in fact, at least the kind that I have, non-rheumatoid, but rather what they call inflammatory arthritis, is an invasion from an energy parasite. And you can control some aspects of that invasion of the energy parasite, but killing it is a bitch to get rid of it 100%. I've actually been able to do things like reduce visible nodules and distortions in my joints caused by this energy parasite and isolate it to a couple of joints, but I've not been able to kill it. But I was able to cure 100% eczema that had existed for 20 years once I caught on to how all this stuff works. Further, I was even able to describe it in such a way that a woman told her 5-year-old daughter, I believe, how to do it, and she was able to cure her own eczema just because she was so innocent. She didn't know better, and so she meditated on it and figured it out and cured it. So the world is not as we are told. The idea that you can decide I'm going to have nothing but positive, harmonious thoughts is bogus. I would defy that. And in fact, such a state of continuous bliss is not life as I would describe it. Life requires necessary suffering, ups and downs, continuous, disharmony, if you will, and struggle. And that's the point of it. Now, you can get into the Buddhist level where they say, well, there's the universal consciousness, the grand universal consciousness, and all the shades of consciousness down to the thick, syrupy mass that is the condensate that is your body. Because your body is also conscious, independent of you. It will keep breathing even if your consciousness is separated from the body. under certain circumstances. So drugs only separate your consciousness so far, but I know people that can meditate so much that they can drift away so far that they won't breathe without a minder. And so you've got to get them back to the level of their body. So they have really good consciousness, much greater than the anesthesiologist could deliver. So I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. You know?
All right.
Yeah, I could do that. I actually have faced the choices, you know, shall I take this path or shall I take the other? And I chose to go to the dark route because of certain things, but I could have done the intention route. I could have done the intentional sacrifice and gone the media propaganda horror route. I've had that offered to me and had it presented, and it wasn't attractive to me. So, you know, it was a waste of time for me because of where I am and that kind of thing. But because that was exposed to me and I saw it, I know how that works. And it's dangerous, and people need to be advised of that. It has blowback.
All right, interesting, really good. And now I want to get into more detail about Fukushima in the second hour, but I know that there's something you want to kind of detail here before we wrap things up with the first hour. So let's do that right now then, Clif. Sure,
real quick, and I really appreciate your hanging on for this. But because of, we can go into all the reasons I've had troubles with the data and so on later on, but I have 2 points of interest about Fukushima. And let's just say Fukushima and or also other nuclear events. And I have 2 particular dates, and they're July 10th and December 14th. The linguistics that I have for July 10th indicate that they're going to have a big shock, an energetic response, a giant noise on July 10th relative to the nuclear situation. So my mind at this stage is pegging that to Fukushima. There are some indications that Fukushima is involved as well, but I don't have a surety just yet because I'm early in the process. I also, though, do have a temporal echo for whatever occurs on July 10th will either reoccur, be abated, or be controlled on or by very close to December 14th. The word that's associated with the December 14th occurrence is resolution. Not in a good way, though. And that's basically because I've been asked, was there anything in the data? I thought I would get it out in this portion of the interview, and I thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk more about it, obviously. The website is halfpasthuman.com. Where do people go to find out more about the analysis that you guys are doing there?
If you go to the upper right-hand corner, you can see about our processes and practices. They've got a column of various rants and raves and other sorts of articles, some of which you can pick and choose, some of which have good stuff in them, and others I'm just blowing off steam. And then we have our reports, and if you're desperately poor and you're a regular human and you can't afford it, you can always ask us for a report and we'll send it to you for free. But please, everybody needs to bear in mind, we've just discovered how egregiously we've been ripped off by these giant corporations that literally were circulating tens of thousands of copies of our reports. I mean, I won't go into that as well, but so I'm giving them away for free, but you know, if you could not rip us off, it would help everybody's karma.
Absolutely. Go to the process page that Clif mentioned there up in the top right corner and scroll down. You can get the latest ALTA report right there and read more about all these things, of course. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these aspects in the second hour and what